Have you lost your job? Have you lost a loved one? Are you exhausted caring for your parents, for your kids? Well, you can find immediate relief when you read Sheila Mac's new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. So if life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.sheilamac.com today.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio, Mondays at 1 and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have a guest, Jonni Redick. And Jonni is a leadership coaching and consulting specialist. She enhances personal and professional performance to build resilient leadership for the 21st century for organizations. She is the founder and CEO of JLConsulting Solutions, where she develops corporate cultures that empower teams, enhance leadership, resiliency, building trust and legitimacy internally and externally. She has 29 years career history in law enforcement, where she became a police executive within the top 1% of her organization of over 1,100 employees and industry-wide, in the top tier of women leadership in policing. She blends her life of being a biracial feminine police chief into her leadership speaking engagements surrounding DEI, gender equality, and her balance of work life in this very dangerous profession. Her progression from frontline police work to executive leadership in a large state agency serving the entire state of California generated her passion for building resiliency in organizational cultures. She has provided consultation, coaching, and training for thousands of personnel in the corporate, education, and government nonprofit sectors. All right, welcome to the show, Jonni.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Wow. So that's quite a career. So one of the things that I like to start off with the show is the show started with my best-selling new book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And of course, this last 12 months, I think we've had every situation that we could never even imagine before 2020. And so I'd like to start off with maybe if you have a story about your business or personal life where you hit a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and when I was early on in my career in law enforcement, I came on at 21, and I remember a very dark period in my life, which I thought was momentary, where I felt isolated, I felt alone, I felt overwhelmed by the gravity of the work. We see a lot of death, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of hypervigilance that takes place in policing. And, I was 21, just turned 22. I was living away from home and I was experiencing depression. And I didn't realize what I was experiencing, but I was having thoughts of wanting to take my own life. And, I have a gun, I have the ability to do so. And it was a very difficult time. I didn't realize what I was experiencing. And some of the things that helped kind of pull me out of that moment were a simple change in my environment, a change in the things I was doing. I was working graveyards for a long period of time. But what I didn't realize is that cumulative experience over 29 years, I didn't really address it. I didn't go to any kind of counseling. I didn't really speak to anybody. I stayed silent because in policing, if you have a psychological issue, you could lose your job. You could have your, weapon taken away from you. So I was afraid to share it with anybody. And I was embarrassed as well because it seemed like something I should cope with. Well, fast forward about 20, probably 15 years, and I had an officer who was killed in the line of duty in one of my commands. And it was extremely traumatic for the family. I mean, it's indescribable. But what I didn't realize for myself was because I didn't address what I was experiencing early on in my career, and then the accumulation of all the other traumatic events that I'd experienced in those 15 or 17 years, when this incident happened, it literally shattered and devastated me internally. Externally, I tried not to let anybody see once again because I'm in command leadership. Right. But inside, I was crumbling. And I realized for the first time, I couldn't solve this one on my own because I was having those thoughts again in a very, it was bigger, it was magnified way. And so, I'm a believer in Christ, so I have a faith. However, I felt so far away from any type of help in that way. So I sought out therapy. I went to go see a counselor, which again, it's confidential, but I also didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want anybody to think psychologically I couldn't function and do my job. There's a standard of expectation of what you should do in policing. And I was a female commander, and I was the first female commander in that particular command. And so what I discovered through those counseling sessions, though, were very eye-opening, that by simply seeking help and actually stepping into the help, that what I was experiencing wasn't so abnormal from what other people might experience in different ways. Policing may be different, but it made me feel a bit normal. And they were able to give me coping skills and things to be able to work through that. And so here all this time, I'm always helping my employees and, cultivating good things for them to do. And then all along the way, I wasn't doing that for myself. And so it was a very big paradigm shift for me. And it took a while for that to happen.
Oh, that's incredible. So if you're listening in now, remember, ask for help when you need it. It's always okay to ask for help when you need it. And one thing I share on every show is about the 211, which is something that people may need. You may never have needed anything, any resource before, but now with job loss, business closures, and different things going on, maybe you have someone at home or you're struggling with depression, an addiction, different situations. Maybe you need help getting food on your table or finding a new job. So if you Google or dial 211 in your state or province in Canada, you'll be able to get resources and help you need to get back on track. And it just helps you get back on track faster. And it's easier that way. And it's something, just keep that in mind to share with a loved one or post at work, because people, they might not want to say anything or share. You didn't want to share with everybody else at work. But if they saw that poster, then it's like, oh, there is help. I can get counseling, I can get help, or maybe for a loved one. And so that's really important. Now, you started very young. I have children older than when you started, older 21 when you started in the police force. Wow. So you did your training and went right into that career. That is a tough career.
Yeah, no, it was more of, I had come up raised by a single mother who was struggling with her own drug addiction, mostly prescription drugs, because she was a registered nurse. So she would have instability, financially, if she'd be working or not working. Oftentimes I grew up with family members or friends because she might be gone for several days. Sometimes we, would live in a shelter. It just depended on her stability. We would always be pseudo together because she didn't leave me forever in that essence, but she would leave me for spells of time and then come back. And so from that kind of fractured childhood, I didn't like the instability. I didn't like not knowing where we were going to eat. I didn't necessarily like government assistance and having food stamps. And I didn't like where we had to live in, subsidized housing. And I didn't want that for any children that I might have or, my family. So I was a typist clerk for our county when I graduated high school. I only had a few units of college, but I got a job at 18 and became a clerk typist for a small group of social workers. And I enjoyed the job, but it wasn't challenging. And there was a huge ad in the paper when I was 20 and a half for the California Highway Patrol. And I grew up on chips, if anybody remembers Ponce and John. And I thought how cool that would be to go surfing or work along the beach, right? Because I was from a Central Valley here in California. And when I applied, I had no idea what to expect in policing, but I was able to pass the entrance exams. I didn't have a background, so there wasn't a whole lot of background checking. And I had all the other qualifications. And I will tell you that I was not mature enough to start that journey, but I was in. And then I went to training, and I would tell you that it probably took me several years to really understand the maturity and responsibility level of which I was embarking on. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. And there's so much going on, obviously, on our planet and in the United States with police and this and that right now, and a lot of tension. And so there's so many incredible police officers that, I mean, when I've had to call 911 a few times in my life, I had people that I went on vacation and I came back and there were people in my house in the middle of the night. I was like, I'm in the house and there's somebody in the other room. And there was like 13 police officers showed up, and it was pretty scary. And so, then you're so thankful, and there's one or two that are not so good and need to be weeded out, obviously, but it's such a difficult job, and every day you're dealing with high pressure, crazy stuff, kind of like 2020 may have been easier. I don't know, because you're used to it. How did that affect you as a person, and as far as getting through something so crazy and crisis when you see crisis every day for a living?
Yeah, crisis can look like a lot of things for people, right? And so I've been to hundreds of critical incidents working on my career. From some of our largest forest, fires that we've had in California, being an incident commander for those for thousands of personnel during our shifts, to tragic fatal collisions out on the freeway, to the loss of our own officers who've died, too many to count, especially when you move up in executive leadership, because now, just to give you context, the CHP has over 11,000 employees, and that's across the entire state of California. And out of that, there's over 7,500 roughly sworn officers that do the work. And in a division, we have 8 or 9 of those that spread throughout the entire state. You can have anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 employees underneath that umbrella. And so that amplifies the number of crisis experiences that you have versus maybe your own when you're working. And so 2020, and now, of course, 2021, with the pandemic and the social unrest and the divisiveness in our country, has created a trauma on people that will take a very long time to heal. And everybody can experience it differently. And what I've realized, especially in leadership, because now I do consulting in leadership, because I took all my experience from the department of teaching and training and leading, and I cultivated it into my business. is that leaders are faced with crisis, not only external from all these experiences that are happening, but also internal with having to deal with their employees, maybe stakeholders specific to them, as well as their self, to be resilient and how to be able to respond and be able to be productive, but also be engaged. And, we moved to this remote way of working, right? So you used to be able to walk down the hall and stop in and check on people or maybe grab a bite to eat with them. Now we can't do that. And so what I find in some of my clients is this challenge to how do you connect and be engaged in this remote time. And so there's some very, unique things that people are doing, but the one common thread is that you have to be very intentional. You have to be intentional about it. You have to be authentic about it. And this really will drive the engagement and how people are going to respond to you. It's time for this authentic leadership and engagement to really kick in. We might have been able to hide that a little bit in the workplace because, you can have intermittent touches throughout the day in the sense of committee meetings or different things like that, and you didn't have to. But now everything has to come through the camera, right? Comes through our, interactions verbally. And so it's a challenging time, and people are experiencing trauma in different ways.
Yes. Yes, and I can imagine, I mean, as a business leader myself, you have people that are employees, and now you're on Zoom calls, but they have their kids that are now homeschooled. Maybe their spouse or significant other is home, or they have an elder home they're caring for also. So there's some kind of chaos going on in the other room usually, and they've got to deal with doing work and staying focused and on track in a different environment. An environment makes such a difference in your work life. And then you're kind of pulled into so many different directions. So I'm an entrepreneur. Most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur. It's a little different if you've had that skill than if you go to work every day and you have that structure. So now there's less structure and there's more to do than ever. And that's where that leadership that you're consulting on really can help people, even in a smaller business, to get on track. I would imagine.
Yeah. So, some of the things that we don't even sometimes think about. And so that's the beauty of having somebody help you to identify your blind spots, right? Because sometimes we can get so caught up in the mission of the work, and the mission of the work can just be the daily operations, right? Just trying to make the daily grind happen, whatever all of that takes, which is good. But we can't forget that we also have to have a lens that can forecast, that can see the implications of things that are going to be happening, whether they're going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, or 3 years. As we know, people will have a strategic vision plan, right? But things are happening exponentially now, especially with the change in, we've had a transition at our highest office. So it creates a transition through every form of government, private industry and everything. So we have to adjust to some things that are going to continually happen. But if we're so caught up in the focus of the day-to-day stuff, it's hard for us to put that lens on. And so what I like to help people think about is how to also create boundaries for themselves and their staff so they can better manage their day and better, consider things that have to be done now, but the things that they really need to start looking at that are coming up, because that'll help reduce some of the stress, right? Yeah. Some of the fatigue that they're going to place on themselves and their employees when you just have a better plan and a better approach to doing things. And sometimes it just takes somebody to help you to identify that. And what I discovered is there's a couple of things. Either your staff hasn't been well trained, and so they have no awareness of what they should be looking at or how they should do it, or you have staff who have decided to be mediocre. And so when you do leadership building and development, you have to be able to identify what the needs are for not only individuals in the company, but maybe the even overall corporate culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's effective things that you can do for that. Nobody has to deal with a mediocre employee. There's different ways to be able to develop them through performance and some other things. And then you have those who Maybe they just haven't been exposed. And so I love being able to, dive into that with people who and executives who haven't really had time to think about it. Not that they're not smart enough or sharp enough, but again, if they're a small business, they're focusing on certain things. If you're a big business, a big corporate business, you get lost in the bigness of what you do. And your expectation is people in your infrastructure, your hierarchy, are doing what they're supposed to do. And occasionally they're not. So that's where further training is needed in your supervisors, your mid-management level. And I enjoy really coaching executives also, not just on their vision or their strategic vision, but what I find a lot is they just need help on mindset. Mm-hmm. It's not that they don't really know or do, but sometimes we all need, that reminder of our own confidence, of our own ability. Maybe they need somebody to sound that out or help somebody, again, identify those blind spots that they have at their executive level. So.
Now, could you give me an example of the boundaries that you help people implement in their businesses?
Yeah. So, for example, I have a client and they have a lot of work tasks and projects and things that have to get done. But what I notice is because I get to sit in sometimes on some of the meetings just as a, observer, and because it's nothing that's confidential can be released. But what I notice is they're not very efficient at what they're doing or effective. And they've created this urgency for whatever the meeting is about, but people who leave don't leave clear with clarified, direction or purpose of what they're going to do. And so part of the boundaries was, sitting down to say, well, what's the priority, right? What are the things that you need to do? Because everything doesn't have to be done at once. Because if you don't create boundaries by creating better priorities, better time management when you're having meetings, and boundaries for yourself on all the work that you're putting into to do something that's not going to be effective or efficient or have good outcomes. And so what we do is we just practice those things because some people don't know how to make something a priority. They don't know how to necessarily say, this is more important and that can wait. And so we have those conversations to be able to identify that. I also find boundaries are important personally for leaders in their life. Because we can find ourselves pulled to do so many things. We're on committees, maybe we're helping with things with our family or our children. We're also trying to promote maybe. And so, even further, because I can be an executive, but maybe I'm not number one, but I want to be number one. Mm-hmm. So now I'm drawn to say yes to a lot of things, when in actuality, I don't have the capacity to say yes to anything else. So creating healthy boundaries around your own desire to, go up in an organization, but how to be effective with the boundaries, because we don't want to say no to everything, but it's also how we say no, right? Mm-hmm. And owning our own space and owning our own voice to be able to do that. So there's the ones we do professionally in the work environment for ourselves to be effective and efficient, for our staff and our teams to create healthy boundaries, but then also personally, what those might look like. And that's just a series of working through people and their specific goals and things they're trying to do.
Yes. And I think this year, or starting last year, that line has really changed, because now with family home, the boundaries have shifted. You don't get to have the boundaries you did. You may have children at home. I have college kids that the dorms closed, the college is closed, and they're home, and I'm enjoying every minute of this bonus time with my kids. It's like you have this relationship with your adult kids and you get to know them in a different way, and we're doing fun, crazy things and getting through this, and I'm having a blast with it, but it's difficult because it's such a hard time emotionally for young adults to not be able to go do college stuff that they love. I mean, I have really good students, good kids. I have 6 kids, 3 are adopted, 3 are mine. They're all mine now, and so they're used to doing so much. And they actually were able to get jobs now, not because they really have to work. They're still doing full time, but they're bored. And they were like, hey, I can get out of the house to go work because it's so difficult to just be home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to find some innovative ways to, keep your mind busy. So, me and my husband have a blended family. We have five altogether. So I have two and he has three, and they're all young adults. And very fortunate that all of the young adults that were, working were able to keep their jobs and work remotely. But my daughter, who is 24, has anxiety, and she's had it since a very young age. And of course, it, became worse during the pandemic because everything began to shut down. She wasn't able to actually go into her job. She had to work from home. Her social life, of course, like everyone else's, was shifted incredibly. And so just really staying engaged with her to find positivity and gratitude, things to be grateful for, things to be, thankful for in the day, all day long, right? And then also interactive things for her to do so she can still be connected to her friends, and you can still socially distance, wear your mask. You can still, go out to the park or do whatever. You just have to do it in a different way. But just really trying to keep her engaged, even simply walking around your apartment complex 2 or 3 times a week. She's young, she doesn't need to, right? Because, they can eat and do whatever they want and, not have to do anything. But I told her, for your mental health, to also to, get your energy back up and free the sunshine to get on you. These are all the things that are simple. And I said, if you think about the people that can't do that, it makes you grateful and want to be able to go do it because you can. Because there's a lot of people that aren't across the entire globe. Everybody doesn't have, the opportunities that you do that we take for granted. So don't take those little things for granted. Lean into them.
Right. That's incredible. And I have a daughter that exact same age. So I know what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
she's never walked so much in her life. When we were stuck at home and everything was locked down at first, we both walked a lot, and then we have a Peloton, and I think that was our saving grace. It was mental. It wasn't even about physical. It was mental, like just to actually go take a walk and get on the bike and just get away from being in the house. It
Absolutely.
really helped mentally. So now you had this incredible career and you raised children at the same time. So for moms and dads even listening in, do you have any advice for how to have a career and raise kids at the same time? Any pointers that you learned throughout that season in your life?
Yeah, so maybe I will share things for you to consider that you might do differently too. Because of course, sometimes we don't realize the impact that we have until after it's already happened. So, being in policing, it is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. So I would work graveyards, I would work, long days, long hours, and hardly see the children sometimes. So when they were younger, I tried to work a graveyard so I could compromise, and they would be asleep when I'd be at work. And then I would be able to see them in the morning before they went off to school. And so just kind of compromising with my husband for us to be able to create, parental kind of opportunities for us to both parent and equally share the load. It was difficult because he was also in policing. So, his schedule was not an 8 to 5 either. So it made it even, double difficult. But what I really found that resonated for me and with them was the moments that we did have. I was undistracted. I was very in the moment with them. If we were going to read a book, if we were going to watch a TV show, not my TV show, a TV show they'd want to watch,
Right.
I would sit there and I would thoroughly enjoy the show. I would know the characters, I would laugh, but I would be really present in the moments. And I don't know if because of all the tragedy that I'd seen of, collisions and accidents with young children killed or parents killed, that time with them became so priceless for me that every moment was a moment I didn't know if I would have the next time, going to go do the work I was doing, but I would make it very intentional. And then also I started becoming a little more transparent, not in the gory details of my work, but they needed to have an insight of the work that their mom was doing so that they didn't have to be afraid. because, you know, they have their own understanding of what policing can be like. I would go to some of their, you know, I'd stop in at the school in my uniform, and most of the young kids would say, you know, hi, Officer Reddick, how are you? Did you shoot anybody today?
Huh.
And I was like, well, no. And I said, that's not all I do. I actually help people. And then I would share with them how we help people, that we're also not out there in gun battles and fights that you might see on TV or whatever. And so for my kids, that would make them afraid, thinking that that's what I had to go out to do, even though it's dangerous and I know it. I needed to share some of the other pieces of what work was like so they weren't afraid. So sharing what you do during your day sometimes, depending on your child's age, it's really helpful for them. It's helpful for them to understand and cope. And then through my progression as they got a little older was understanding that they're growing up even while we're away.
Yeah.
And so I can't come back and keep treating them like the children I keep thinking they are, because time is passing so much that I have to stop and really, you know, create better relationships with them at the age that they're at. And I realized that I would come home and I would be short-tempered because I would be tired and fatigued, and, you know, I might bark at them, and I was, you know, very disciplinarian. I mean, I still hear that today. They call me chief all the time. Okay, chief. And I'm like, oh, am I sounding too strict? And they're like, a little. We're adults.
Yeah.
But just creating the relationships that evolve over time and allowing them to grow, but you have to go with them. And so all of that really helped me to have balance, so that my son, who was oldest, understood it. I needed some of his help sometimes to be able to help with his sister. And then, you know, relationship wise, my husband and I were married for 18 years. And then we divorced. It was a very tough 18 years because, again, we were both in policing. We both were experienced to a lot of cumulative trauma, and we were both trying to be really good parents. We are very good friends, and we raise the kids together, which I am so blessed to be able to say, because not everybody gets that, you know, after a divorce. But I would say in your relationships is to also be just as present, just as, you know, respectful of one another that you can. And if you can't do it alone, ask and go get help, especially if it's something worth saving. So.
Definitely. That's beautiful. And it is so important. And to have time with our kids is priceless, and something, bring them into your business, talk about what you do. I mean, we just had our political season and like we have a new administration and all that, and whatever you voted for, whoever, bring your kids into it, share about what's going on. I think they're scared a lot of times with even my young adults, like all that's going on. If you have these really important discussions and talk about it as a family, it's going to help bring some peace, and so that they know that they're safe and that it's okay. And, you know, if you're involved with politics or you're involved with even your bills, if you share these things, this is such a learning opportunity right now. I have something in my eye. Oh. It's a learning opportunity. Yes. And life skills, something that we all need and wish we had before we left home. So this is the opportunity to share that with your kids. I know I had gift stores for many years. I started when I was 23 and I ended up opening 5 and running them. And my children helped. You know, that I'd be like, okay, we're going to pick out merchandise, and we'll have one room that we had sections. And so one section was a game section for educational toys, and the grandmas would all buy for their grandkids. And my kids would get to order all the toys, and they'd come into the shop on the weekends and they'd play games, and everybody, they'd say, oh, wow, look, they're learning math and they're playing games, and they'd buy the games, and they were part of the business, and they're all business minded and got to manage.
You were building leadership.
Yes. And it's just, they understand. And also we talk about the budget and reality. And so when there's a tough year, or, okay, there's a crisis and you got to pay a medical bill for somebody in the family, or whatever happened, they get it, and they'll help out, or they'll they'll understand if you can't buy the latest, greatest. And that was always something we were really open about. And it was easier than it being a big secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I noticed the questions that my adult children are asking me now,
Mhm.
and the things that I try to share with them about the profession, because I also adjunct teach for the University of San Diego in their graduate program for law enforcement and public safety leaders. So those are executives that come up from all across the country and are part of this online master's graduate program. And the things going on with social, unrest, they are really asking questions as, again, I'm biracial, so my children are African American, and they're like asking these questions about policing and what's going on. And so I try to share with them that this is also a great opportunity to create better communication, better understanding between policing and the community. And I said, that's why I stay engaged. That's why part of my leadership work is actually working with, community leaders and community groups with policing, and bridging the conversations and having understanding, and bringing new ideas, and helping to also change paradigms in community towards policing, and policing towards the community. Because we've talked about, community oriented policing for decades, and how we should engage with the community, yet we're still having this very big rift with particular segments of the community. And so we can't broad brush and put every community the same, when culturally we have very different ways of, communicating and understanding. And let's just be honest, history in our country, that we can't put everybody in the same, so to speak, framework of how we're going to approach the community. And so what I think is really great about this time, though, is change can really happen. It just takes action. We're having lots of conversations, we're having lots of dialogue. I tell them, I said, but we need action. So we need some ideas, we need solutions, we need, better ways to think about things that people aren't thinking of. And I said, young people play a huge part in what that looks like, to be able to bridge connectivity with your group. My son is 28, going to be 29. And so I'm saying everybody has some accountability in this. Absolutely. Is there a space in the policing profession for improvements, for better work? You betcha. They do a great job. We have 700, 900,000 sworn officers across the United States doing work in 18,000 police departments, right? And so, yes, we have those who are racist, who are biased, who are doing things that they shouldn't. But we have a large body of people who don the uniform to go out and serve and be of service in a very noble profession. They could still use additional training, additional understanding, better ways to go about doing business. So I think everybody's open to that. I just think it's the message being delivered can be received differently depending on the messenger. So I love putting myself in the place to be a messenger that can be heard on both sides and help to find the common ground that's needed to make the improvements. And so I've had several opportunities to do that, especially recently. And, I encourage people who struggle with being the messenger or being able to find the common ground themselves to bring somebody else in that's an outside, third party that can help to do that for you. It's very effective.
Yes. And it's something that I have a rainbow of children at home, and my youngest son, who was my birth son, and he actually passed away from a heart condition last year, but he went to a summer school to catch up because he failed a class when he was in, I think it was high school or middle school, one of those two. And he is not looking white at all. He dark and beautiful and incredible. I have to say, I mean, he's passed away, but he's just my favorite, my baby. He was my youngest and good kid. Well, he goes to a private school. We paid for the summer school because he didn't want to have to repeat a grade. And we paid for this class. Kids that were there had been passing counterfeit bills for a year. And he wanted to be friends. Somebody gave him a 20 to buy lunch, and they caught him and they said, well, we caught all these kids with the counterfeit bills. they wanted to take my son. Now, he was the only child that was not white. Okay. They wanted to take him to juvenile hall. And I said, well, I'm going to call the news and I'm going to call my lawyers, because if you're not taking the other kids, you're not taking my son. There's absolutely no, either we all go together or nobody goes, because first of all, he barely got here for a few weeks, and this has been going on for over a year in your school. So how is this that he brought something, and he had been traveling with me for a year? So there's not a possibility, and so, but there was a difference. And
Well, absolutely. And that's part of the, disparity that we want to bring out in conversations so that systemically there can be changes institutionally, whether they're a criminal justice system, an educational system, a corporate culture, whatever that looks like, to create better, equity and fairness, and inclusivity. And, sometimes it takes a mother or a parent or somebody stepping up and standing up for what's right for people to go, hesitate and go, well, wait a minute, maybe we should reevaluate this, because sometimes some children don't have all of that support, right? And so I just think it's really important that, for all of us to be a part of the conversation, but especially after I retired, I didn't want to just go be in Maui on vacation or, working in my garden. I
Right.
accumulated all my experience, my skills, my knowledge, all of that to be able to continue to contribute. And I contributed to, like I said, nonprofits, corporate, C-suite. But law enforcement is really the place of my niche. This is where I, work with a lot of executives, especially police chiefs and their organizational culture, on really identifying these things that can make change. Because that very thing that you and your son had to experience, this is what still many are experiencing when they have an interaction with a police officer. Does not make him a racist. It just makes him, he has implicit bias. He is treating someone differently because of their background, their culture, their difference from them, and what they're comfortable or used to. And I know you've had individuals on talk about emotional intelligence and the extreme importance of that. It is extremely important that we continue to have training, more training on emotional intelligence, so that we can slow down and actually interact and engage with people in a humanitarian way, versus always feeling like it has to be this warrior versus guardian, especially in policing.
Right. I really feel like the police should be something where you feel safe.
And the majority of the time you do.
It really is. And it's, we want to be able to call 911 and be able to get help. Now I shared 211 for resources, and we want to be able to have these resources and really have them keep people safe. That's the really important thing. It could change somebody's life. It could save so many lives. We have to have something, somewhere to call.
And, again, I would say a large percentage of your police officers, and I know we've heard numbers on the news, 99.999% are all doing good. I don't have the data on that number, but I can tell you, working in policing for so long, all my officers that come to work don't come with the intention to create harm to anybody. But you do have opportunities and moments throughout your career where your behavior and your conduct, if not addressed, can become a slippery slope on how you're going to treat people, period. How you're going to treat people, right? And you can treat them poorly and indifferently, or you can actually cause harm to them. And this is the thing that we're dealing with. Again, there's probably pockets of racism. There's probably lots of implicit biases. But to me, it's really this very inappropriate, unprofessional way that we treat people that is actually allowed, that progresses in an organizational culture. If you don't address it, and you can no longer be complicit, because that's what silence is. Also, if we don't hold people accountable in any kind of performance reviews or immediate action taken when you see it, it allows itself to exacerbate, and that becomes your issue on how people are going to start treating people internally, with other employees and staff, and externally with your consumers, your clients, the community, whatever that may look like.
Right. And is there any, well, I guess, I don't know, since you're retired, but I'm wondering if there's any plans to offer more help and guidance or psychological checks or something, so that if there's a situation and other officers report, oh, you know, this one person I'm working with, whoa, this isn't working out, or they're having these issues, where they're able to get help really quickly now without pushback or problems that way.
So, you know, currently most agencies have processes in place to get employees assistance. If they're dealing with something from a critical incident, or they're having issues where they need to speak to a therapist, most have what's called an employee assistance program. There's also peer support programs. So you have peers that maybe have experienced some things that you have. You can call upon them confidentially and be able to talk to them in an informal way. You know, they're implementing more things for mindfulness in training and practices that help people to, it's almost like meditative, right? So mindfulness could be a lot of things. Practice, it could be like slow your breathing down. They could be incorporating yoga. They might be allowing personnel to be able to work out before or after shift, which we know helps with a lot of physiological and physical aspects of policing due to the hypervigilance all day. So there's a lot of different resources that police agencies have and are expanding into, but it's an evolutionary process, because as we're discovering with more research, more evidence, more data on the impact of policing to actual officers, and then also the interactions with community or those that they come in contact to affect an arrest, there's a lot of research being done to see, you know, how we can balance all those things out, maybe in training, maybe in additional processes, maybe in the type of police officers that are being brought on. But we're finding it's also in the communication, which is the hugest. There's a misunderstanding perceptually by the community on what police do. And there's also a misperception by policing on what the community expectations are. And that's research that's out there. And so that's a huge, you know, disparity when we need to come to some understanding. There's a place for a lot of work in a lot of areas.
Yes, that's great. And I'd love to go back to now what you're doing as far as with your consulting work, and what that would look like if a company wanted to work with you. How would they start that, and what does that process look like?
So if a company wanted to work with me, so initially what I do is I provide like a capabilities briefing of what I can do, which is a lot of things, right? But I don't like to just throw everything at everybody. So I kind of need to have a needs assessment. So what are you actually wanting to solve? What is the problem that you're having? What is the challenge, you know, that you may be facing in your company? Whether, like I said, it's you as the executive, or it's you with your staff, or does it have to do with your organizational infrastructure or culture? So sometimes I will help them do assessments of processes and programs for better efficiency, identify streamlining, things that maybe they don't need any longer, but maybe there's some things that they want to try that are innovative. I do have, you know, several clients that have issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we take a look at their processes, right? We look to see what their recruitment looks like, what their onboarding looks like, what their hiring components look like, what is the actual succession of the organization, what are things that are in place for that. I do leadership training and consulting. So maybe they have things that have staff that need help with problem solving or team building, or maybe they need new supervisors who need help to understand their role as a new supervisor, which there's a lot of nuances, but there's also technical things that they need with that. So when they come in, I do this needs assessment to see what's needed. And most of the time, I work in a consultant capacity where I help them and their teams to figure out what their plan is, or maybe we think about what their training might look like. And occasionally, I can come in and provide the actual training for them. I found that most of them like to develop some of their own training so they can continue to have it. And so that works nicely. But if they need me to come in and present training, I will do that. I've been asked to do presentations, especially in this remote space, to come and do an hour and a half or 2 hours of what we call micro sessions, so to speak, of training based on their needs assessment that they have. And and I do some coaching individually with some executives one-on-one, which I really enjoy. But generally, that is what it is. It's just really identifying what it is that they need, and then us sitting down and coming up with a plan for that. And then I help to deliver that and reach their goals.
That's great. And how can people reach you?
You can reach me. I'm JLConsulting Solutions. So I have a website. It's the same name. And then also my name is Jonni Redick. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It also has more of my bio information. It also has how to connect with me on my website. My website has about me. I'm on Instagram at JLConsulting Solutions as well. And so there's lots of ways to connect with me.
All right. Well, thank you for being a guest on the show. And I look forward to getting this on the air soon. And so for those that are listening in, stay tuned and we will be back shortly.
Thank you so much.
If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and I have some news for you. Yes, you. I'm celebrating my 3rd year now on the station and will be expanding the show to a global network as well. You may now find the Sheila Mac Show on all major podcasting channels, and if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, all the episodes are now available for viewing there as well. And I'm asking you for a quick favor. If you like the show, please help support the spread of this reboot channel on YouTube as well. My goal is to help as many people as possible through our interesting times to rebuild, reinvent, and reboot your business and personal life. I also wanted to share a little bit more about how I got here, what I do now, and how designing a business career and life on your terms is more than possible at any age or stage in life. I am an enterprisingly forward-thinking consultant, show host, and best-selling author. But how did I get here? Well, I began my career as an entrepreneur and property investment strategist back when I was 23 years young, when I boldly quit my government job with NASA JPL to open my first of 5 large gift stores while also starting to invest in property. I got to work with some of the world's most loved companies, such as negotiations on leases with Warner Brothers and winning trips to London as the top-selling Crabtree and Evelyn provider in the U.S. for multiple years. My stores were built on heart as I gave back to the community I came from. So now, some of you know this and some of you don't know this, but as a young girl with parents who were not well enough to care for me, I was homeless at age 10, then in foster care, where it was really hard to get a job while in the system. I finally emancipated at the age of 15 to start college early. While running my stores, I worked with a government program. Back then, it was called Job Training Partnership Act, making my stores an open source training site where close to 200 at-risk youth started their careers. Yes, I began my career helping business leaders and working professionals to design a life they love where they can have success in their careers and get to the business of life. See, a funny thing happened along the way. When I first opened my gift store, it was kind of crazy because I was this young upstart. That's what a lot of the store owners called me. My first store was in Montrose, California, in this sweet little hometown shopping park with other stores and restaurants nearby. And so I was the young upstart that didn't know what she was doing. At least that's what everybody said. And I didn't really care what they said. At that age, their opinion was like, I don't really care. So that was probably a really good thing because I stayed focused on what I needed to do. And I had negotiated to lease out a 5,000 square foot gift store that, needed a lot of work, and I got free rent and for about 6 months, and I had to start making the rent, which was $5,000 a month, which was a lot of money back then, $1 a square foot. And so I had to learn and relearn. I finally did hire quite soon in the game. I did hire a marketing expert, branding expert, I guess back then. And that lady really helped me to figure things out when I first started. And when you first start a business, especially when you're young, it was like I had no idea what to do, but I needed to learn because my rent was going to start coming due every month. And over that time, I started having more success. I did crazy things, like stayed open until almost midnight every night, along with the restaurants who were very close to my store, while everybody else closed shop at about 5 or 6 p.m. So I was making more money from the start, and I just really, my store was to help my kids, and the products I sold was whatever the community wanted. I sold lots of things to people in the entertainment industry. I worked with cruise ships. I worked with many different people in the community. And later on, the store owners actually came to me and asked me if I would consult them and help them. I actually started buying my other buildings because I didn't like the idea of paying rent for years and years and years and not building equity. So I did get my real estate license through that and invested and bought my other 4 store buildings. And lots of the other store owners worked with me, paid me to consult and help them do what I was doing. And I didn't really even know it was called consulting. I just knew how to figure it out, I guess. And so that's how I started my career. And now, I raised 6 children, all that, and now they're grown. And so I get to come to work every day and do what I naturally do best as an enterprising and forward-thinking business leader. Through my show, courses, and live events, I guide entrepreneurs and working professionals like you through the profitable steps of building a business, creation to expansion, marketing from planning to implementation, wealth preservation through strategic planning and, yes, real estate investing, and lifestyle design so that you can earn more while getting back to the business of living your best life. So I do invite you to tune in here to KCAA Radio, and also I would really appreciate it if you went to my YouTube channel, Sheila Mac Show, and gave a subscribe and a listen to some of your favorite shows. And I do have some other exciting things, including a free gift to thank you. So if you go to www.sheilamac.com, that's SHEILAMAC, SheilaMac.com, there you can get a free gift to get started on your reboot this year. And now, back to the show. Tune in again right here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Have you lost your job? Have you lost a loved one? Are you exhausted caring for your parents, for your kids? Well, you can find immediate relief when you read Sheila Mac's new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. If life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.sheilamac.com today.